The South African government and all of the global opponents of the state of Israel are on the wrong side of history, and in its most recent actions, withdrawing South African diplomats from Israel and threatening the Israeli ambassador to South Africa with expulsion, this government is supporting Iran and its proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah, to destroy the state of Israel and spread global jihad. My name is Rabbi Goldstein. I'm South Africa's chief rabbi, and let me explain to you why I say this. The October 7 massacres and all of the events subsequent to that and everything which is happening in the world today has got absolutely nothing to do with the Palestinian people and the establishment of a Palestinian state, and everything to do with Iran's plans to spread global jihad and to destroy the state of Israel. In fact, the Arab-Israeli conflict has never been about the establishment of a Palestinian state. Never. Because if it were about that, there would have been a Palestinian state long ago. It was offered in 1947 by the international community through a United Nations resolution to establish a Jewish and Arab state side by side in the land that was the British Mandate of Palestine. That was accepted by the Jewish world, rejected by the Arab world, who went to war against the newly born Jewish state. After the 1948 war, in which Israel survived, there was a 19-year period until 1967 when the territories today, which are being claimed for the establishment of a Palestinian state, the West Bank and Gaza, were in Arab hands. The West Bank was in control of Jordan and the Gaza Strip was in control of Egypt. There was no attempt to establish a Palestinian state for all of these 19 years. And then after 1967, Israel attempted many negotiations to establish a Palestinian state, was rejected time and time again. The most recent of which, in the last 20 years, Prime Minister Ehud Barak, followed by Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, all offered Yasser Arafat and the Palestinian Authority to establish a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza with East Jerusalem as its capital, and it was rejected time and time again. In fact, the Gaza disengagement, which was in 2005, that came as a result in exasperation after successive Israeli governments had tried to establish a Palestinian state, which was rejected by the Palestinian leadership. The Israeli government unilaterally disengaged from Gaza in 2005, forcibly removing all Jews living in Gaza. So since 2005, Gaza has been under the control of the Palestinian people who elected Hamas to be their government in 2006. There have been no further elections since then. And so since 2005, almost 20 years, Gaza has not had an Israeli presence. And Hamas leadership in the Gaza Strip took the billions of dollars of aid and used every last cent of it to establish and to build a terror state with weapons of destruction, missiles, establishing and building the tunnels and doing everything in their power to turn that into a state that could be turned on Israel, and in fact has done in all of those years subsequent to the Gaza disengagement, when there hasn't been a Jew in Gaza, Judenrein, completely Jew-free, certainly no occupation, and he turned that into a launch pad to try and attempt to destroy the Jewish state time and time again. And so the blockade and all of the efforts Israel undertook were to protect its own people. And we see that if Israel doesn't protect its people, they will be massacred and murdered, as what happened in October 7. So this has never been about a Palestinian state and never been about what people call the occupation, because there have been so many opportunities for the Arab world, the Palestinian people, to have a Palestinian state. It has been rejected time and time again in favor of a vision plan to destroy the Jewish state and remove it. When people say from the river to the sea, that means there is no Jewish state in that land. And let's be clear about this term occupation. All of these accusations against Israel are so bizarre and absurd, because an argument can be made that in the interests of peace and reconciliation, there should be a two-state solution with a Jewish and Palestinian state side by side. And in the interest of peace, successive Israeli governments have been prepared to offer that, and rightly so. But this is not about occupation. It is so bizarre to accuse the Jewish people of being occupiers in the land of Israel. If we are not indigenous, if Jews are not indigenous to the land of Israel, there is no such thing as an indigenous people. We have a longer connection to the land of Israel than any nation on earth has to any piece of land. There has been an unbroken Jewish presence in the land of Israel for 3,300 years. It has been interrupted in terms of the numbers of Jews living there by the invasions of the Babylonian Empire, by the Greek Empire, by the Roman Empire. But for Jews, this has always been our ancestral land promised to us by God. And if you look in the Bible, you will see, and I call on all fellow human beings in this world, and so many believing Christians who believe in the Bible, have a look in the Bible. There's no way that any believing Christian can say that Jews are occupiers in the land of Israel. To do so would be to reject the book of Genesis all the way through to Deuteronomy, to reject what is written explicitly in the book of Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings, in all the prophets. And most offensive of all and most outrageous of all is Jerusalem. To talk about, the South African government, together with most governments in the world, will not recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, saying that it is occupied territory. Now, Jerusalem, about which it is written in the book of Psalms, if I forget thee, O Jerusalem, im eshkachech Yerushalayim, that verse is known, if I forget thee, O Jerusalem, is known throughout the world. It is a verse that we Jews say at every wedding. We mention Jerusalem at every funeral. It is mentioned in our prayers 3 times a day, in our grace after meals. It is deeply connected to who we are as the Jewish people. To say that Jerusalem is occupied territory, for Jews to be in Jerusalem is to be in occupied territory, is to deny the very notion of any connection that a people can have to a piece of land. Jerusalem was the capital of the Jewish state before anybody had heard of London or Washington or any of the great capitals of the world, and therefore the entire allegation that this is about the occupation or this is about the establishment of a Palestinian state is lies. They're absurd. It's bizarre. It is extremely bizarre, as are all the allegations against Israel. This has got nothing to do with the Palestinian cause and nothing to do with the establishment of a Palestinian state. And those who suffer most from these lies are the Palestinian people themselves, who could have had a state for all of these decades had their leadership not been so intent to destroy the state of Israel as Hamas is today. It is also not about apartheid. It is beyond the realm of reasonable discussion to even have to debate this. Israel is the only free democracy in the whole Middle East. It is the only country in the Middle East that it is safe for Jews and Christians to practice their religion. It is the only country in the Middle East where every citizen has a right to vote, where men and women are equal, where every race, group, religion, faith, creed, nationality has rights as an equal citizen to vote, to be a member of the judiciary, where there is a free press and free association. Now, if that is apartheid, we're living then in a parallel universe. It is a post-truth universe to accuse Israel of perpetrating apartheid. And then the most grotesque allegation of all, even more grotesque than colonialism and apartheid, is the allegation of genocide, that Israel is perpetrating genocide. It is bizarre beyond the realm of any reasonable discussion to even have to defend such an allegation. But what we've learned as Jews in our history, that there is no allegation that is beyond needing to be defended and explained. In our history, we are used to people accusing us of the worst things. We've been accused of killing God. We've been accused of murdering babies to take their blood to make the unleavened bread for Passover. We've been accused of controlling them. We've been accused of everything. And what we've learned from these lies is, firstly, they are very dangerous. And secondly, you have to speak out against them because people start to believe them. As the famous Nazi minister of propaganda, Hermann Goebbels, said, the more you repeat a lie, the more people will believe it. And he would be so proud of the world today. Keep on repeating occupation, keep on repeating apartheid, keep on repeating genocide. The more you repeat it, then people will start to believe that Israel actually is apartheid, is a colonial occupier, and is guilty of genocide. Genocide. How bizarre. October 7 massacres showed us, firstly, what would be if there were no soldiers, Israeli soldiers and policemen, to defend the population of Israel. In just a few hours, Hamas, because there were no soldiers around, because they were caught off guard and without being prepared, massacred 1,500 people, captured hostages. If the Jewish state would put down its weapons for one day, then 6-7 million Jews of the country would be destroyed, murdered, a second Holocaust for sure. It's guaranteed because we know what is stated in the Hamas charter. We know what they did on October 7. It's very clear. On the other hand, the Israeli army has taken greater precautions to avoid civilian casualties than any other army in the history of human warfare. And I challenge anybody to show something otherwise. It is unheard of and unprecedented for an army. And in military strategy, the most important weapon that you have is surprise. Israel gives that up time and again by sending in leaflets, by sending messages on WhatsApps, by warning the population when it is about to attack. And more than that, Israel has sent its own soldiers door to door in Gaza when it has the firepower, the firepower of air and missiles and weaponry to decimate Gaza, and it doesn't do so, and its own soldiers die because they are going door to door in order to minimize civilian casualties. And of course, every civilian casualty is a tremendous sadness and a tragedy. It is a tragedy, and as the Talmud says, to destroy one life is to destroy a world, and Israel lives by that principle. But how can it defend itself if not to be able to go to war to defend itself against the murderous intents of Hamas, who then, and play this game with intent, hide in hospitals. They hide their missiles in hospitals and schools. This is a matter of public knowledge. Everybody in the world knows that Hamas works with this strategy, and they use the media as useful idiots. Israel is doing everything in its power to minimize civilian casualties, as it should. But to be accused of genocide just moves things into the realm of the twilight zone. If it were not so dangerous and so serious, this would be laughable. But all of these accusations against Israel are laughable. This war, this battle has got absolutely nothing to do with the occupation, with apartheid, with genocide. These are lies which have been created in order to destroy Israel, because it is a brilliant plan. You attack Israel militarily, and then the world stops Israel from defending itself by denying Israel the moral legitimacy that it needs in order to defend itself. And so if this conflict is not about these issues of occupation, apartheid, genocide, and that these are just lies fabricated in a return to a dark age of irrationality and non-adherence to facts, what is this really about? It is about Iran's attempt, through its proxies of Hamas and Hezbollah, to eradicate Israel and to spread its ideology of violent jihad. But you don't have to take my word for it. I want to read to you the direct quote of one of the senior leaders of Saudi Arabia from the 4th of November 2023. Saudi Prince Abdulrahman bin Mossad. There is no doubt that the axis of resistance is a big lie. The so-called axis of resistance has been dealing with the Palestinian issue for years and is only a means of implementing Iran's agenda in the region. One of the key leaders of Saudi Arabia saying all of this that we are watching, Hamas, Hezbollah, everything that is happening has got nothing to do with the Palestinian people and everything to do with Iran's agenda in the region. He said it, and he had the courage to say that in public, but everybody knows it. There have been multiple news reports about the collusion between Hamas and Iran in preparation for the October 7 massacres. Iran and Hamas have been meeting on numerous occasions in 2023. It has been reported. It is a matter of public record that this has happened. Iran funds Hamas, plans with Hamas, provides them with the military strategy, equipment to be able to carry this out. So what Hamas did is just an extension of Iran. And so it is of vital strategic importance that the world has absolute clarity about what this conflict is really about. This is about Iran's plans to destroy Israel and spread global jihad. It's very clear. Iran is well known in the world as the main and chief sponsor of state terror in the world. It is a matter of public record that Iran funded Hezbollah's attack and helped them plan it on the Jewish Community Center in Buenos Aires a number of years ago. It is a matter of public record that Iran funds terror groups in Africa, in Asia, across the Middle East. That is their stated aim. And that is what this war is about. And so from a South African point of view, when the South African government supports not only Hamas but Iran, and when the South African Minister of International Relations goes to Iran in the wake of the October 7 massacres, that is making a very loud statement. And on that issue, South Africa, together with all of the opponents of the State of Israel who are marching in global capitals in every part of the world, they are in fact the useful idiots of Iran. Either that, or they are actually complicit in these plans. In supporting Iran and Hamas, allowing a Hamas office to operate freely in Cape Town, what the South African government is doing is not only betraying the State of Israel and the Jewish people, not only betraying democracies throughout the world, they're betraying black Christians in Africa. Because part of what Iran is doing is sponsoring global jihad, which is spreading in Africa and causing more human suffering and deaths in Africa than in any other place in the globe. One of the most untold and unnoticed human tragedies taking place in the world today is taking place on the African continent, where African Christians are being murdered for their faith. It is spreading throughout the continent. Just in the last 2 weeks, never mind going back years, but in the last 2 weeks, on the 24th of October in Uganda, the organization known as the Islamic State murdered 26 people in an attack, a jihadist attack. On the 1st of November, Boko Haram murdered 40 people in Nigeria. There are a number of key global institutes, and I just want to share with you from the notes that I've taken based on research. The EU Institute for Security Studies, the American Enterprise Institute, the Hudson Institute have all noted the rise of jihadism in Africa. The government of Gabon, the vice president, made an announcement that in 2022 on the African continent, almost 8,000 Christians were murdered for their faith by jihadists. The Voice of America reported that in 2022, in sub-Saharan Africa, there were more victims of jihadist terror than in South Asia, Middle East, and North Africa combined. And one of the regional groups of West Africa recorded that in 2023, there have been so far 1,800 terrorist attacks resulting in the deaths of more than 4,600 people, all murdered for their faith. And the South African government should really take note of this, as should all decent people in the world. ISIS Mozambique is responsible for the murder in recent years of more than 4,000 people, the displacement of more than 1 million Mozambicans. Right across the border here. It's not very far away. And recently, in the last number of months, there was an attack on the northern town in Mozambique. That town is Nakatingwe. ISIS Mozambique came into that town and they made 2 lines. Anyone with a Christian name went to the one side, anyone with a Muslim name went to the other side, and then they murdered all of the Christians on the spot, right across the border of South Africa in 2023. ISIS Mozambique is responsible as well for kidnappings, for beheadings, all of the same methodology and ideology of Hamas. And so, what is important for the South African government to know and for the South African people to know, and all good people around the world, that those who oppose the State of Israel, those who are supporting Iran and Hamas, what in fact they are doing is supporting jihadism in Africa, because all of the organizations that are the ideological brothers in arms of Hamas, Boko Haram, ISIS, all of them are operating in Africa and are murdering black Africans at a terrible rate, and it is a story which is untold in the world. Why are there no news headlines about this? Why is nobody speaking about it? Why is it so hard to get the data? In fact, the numbers that I share with you are for sure underestimated because no one is telling the story. It seems that black lives do not matter if they are the victims of jihadism, and that is a matter of serious consequence for our world and places human civilization in serious jeopardy. We are at a critical moment in human history. We cannot afford to be on the wrong side of history. Israel and the forces of goodness and human dignity and freedom need support. Israel is on the front lines defending human civilization at this moment. And if we abandon Israel, it will usher in a dark age of barbarism and irrationality. But now I turn to my fellow South Africans, because I want to say to my fellow South Africans, and particularly South Africans of faith, and I know that we South Africans of faith who believe in the Bible are the vast majority in this country when we have to make our voices heard, because this government's deplorable support for Iran and its proxies to destroy the Jewish state is part of a pattern of behavior. This government, this ANC government, has turned its back on the values of the Bible, and it is bringing curse upon South Africa. And I use that word with intent. And let me explain to you what this means. I want to refer to verses that every South African of faith who believes in the Bible will know so well. You know those verses in Genesis 12, where God says to Abraham, "And I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you." What does blessing and curse mean? The book of Deuteronomy explains in chapter 11. God says in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 11, verse 26, "Behold, I place before you today blessing and curse." And what is the blessing? Then the Bible goes on to explain the blessing, that you will hearken to the commandments of the Lord your God, and the curse if you do not hearken to the commandments of the Lord your God. In other words, blessing comes from a life of goodness, following the values of Abraham, following the values of the Bible, the values of human dignity, of freedom, of faith in God. And I turn to my fellow South Africans, people of faith, and say to you from the bottom of my heart that this government has lost its moral right to govern this country. It has turned its back on the values of the Bible. It has led our nation down a path of curse. Its support of Iran and its proxies to destroy Israel, it's turning its back on our brothers and sisters on this continent, leaving them vulnerable to the attacks of the jihadist terrorists. That is part of a pattern of behavior of rejecting the values of the Bible. We know what those values are. Thou shalt not murder. In this country, 27,000 people a year are murdered. That dwarfs the civilian casualties, even on the worst estimations of what is happening in Gaza. 27,000 people. Thou shalt not murder. This government has presided over that. Thou shalt not steal. This government has presided over state capture, and since then, there has not been one serious, credible conviction of anybody, and no one even being prosecuted except the political opponents of the president. Thou shalt not steal. The Zondo Commission has implicated countless members of the ANC and the ruling party of this government, and what is happening? They're still in office. No prosecutions, no investigations. Thou shalt not steal. And what about what they have done to the state of education? 8 out of 10 10-year-olds are unable to read. And what about the state of our hospitals, where the government hospitals are in such a terrible state that no member, and I challenge them right now to prove me wrong, no member of the ANC, NEC, or their families would ever put a member of family or friends into a government hospital, the ones that they run. And so they are bringing curse on this nation because they have turned their backs on the Bible. They have turned their backs on God. And therefore, people of faith in this country need to know that this battle for Israel is not about only Israel and the Jewish people. It is a battle for freedom in Africa. It is a battle for the values of the Bible. But I'm hopeful because I know that we are a nation of heroes. We are a people of faith. And already this government has lost the support and trust of the majority of South Africans, and it will continue to do so because it has lost the moral legitimacy to govern this country. Allow me to conclude with the verses in the Bible, in the book of Deuteronomy, that sum it all up and give a path forward for Israel, for the world, and for South Africa. Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 19 and 20. Ha'idoti bachem hayom et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. I call heaven and earth today to bear witness. Hachayim ve'hamavet natati lefanecha. I have placed before you life and death. Habracha ve'haklala, blessing and curse. Ubacharta b'chayim. Now choose life, in order that you shall live, you and your descendants, to love the Lord your God, to listen to his voice, to cleave to him. For he is your life and the length of your days, to dwell upon the land that God swore to your forefathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give to them. May God bless us all.